Welcome to Leadership in the New Testament. We're in session 9. And my hope is that as you've gone through each of these sessions, that you've begun to test your leadership. Maybe you have pulled together a team of people, or you're in the process of somehow moving your leadership forward. And remember, no matter where you start, there's more to you that you will discover as you move forward. The same thing is true with the people you're leading. Wherever they begin with your good leadership, they can move forward. Now, in this session, we want to take some time to talk about motivation. And I want to establish something first. I'm actually not going to spend a lot of time deciphering or discerning between bad motivation and good motivation. Now, we'll focus on that a little bit, but what I mean by that is we started this series talking about moral authority. Not your authority over somebody else's morals. I know we've said that many times, but to clarify, your trajectory of trustworthiness, so that your deed matches your creed, your actions match what you say, so that people can follow you. So in general, I'm assuming that your motivation, as far as your moral motivation, is pure and trustworthy. What I'm actually talking about is what moves you to action. What motivates you to action? Now, when you think about this, you might think, well, that's pretty easy. I mean, people get motivated all the time. Well, the difference between a leader and someone who is not a leader is that you can stay motivated over a long period of time, and you can stay motivated through the highs and through the lows. I am an NBA fan. I love basketball at all levels, high school, college, professional. But I became a professional fan because I grew up in Portland, Oregon, and the only professional team that we had at the time in Portland, Oregon was the Portland Trail Blazers, so everybody became a fan, and I absolutely love following that team. But if you know anything about an NBA season or a Major League Baseball season, they last a long time. There are over 160 games in a Major League Baseball season. There are over 80 games in an NBA season, 162 and 82 games respectively. This takes a long time. And during those long seasons, the teams will perform well for a while and not perform well for a while. They might have several great victories in a row and then inexplicably lose a game that they should have won. So the question is, how do they stay motivated for the whole season? There's a terrific Christian author, Eugene Peterson, and he wrote a book entitled A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. How does someone obey the Lord over their lifetime? Not too long ago at our church, we had an opportunity to celebrate with a couple, and we celebrated, listen to this, their 70th wedding anniversary. They were married over 70 years. Now, it was very sweet because as everybody was taking pictures of them, he leaned over and kissed her. They were still romantic after they'd been married over 70 years. But it didn't mean that all 70 years were easy or perfect. They struggled with hard times like everyone else. So the motivation we're talking about here for leaders is, how do you stay motivated over the long haul, and how do you stay motivated when the leading gets difficult? Now, in John chapter 13, we have a very important example in Scripture of leadership. Now, to put this in context, this is the last night when Jesus is arrested. It's the night before He's crucified. Jesus knows that this is unfolding. He gets all of His disciples together, and they have the Passover together. And this famous example of leadership is found in John chapter 13. I'll begin reading in verse 1. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for Him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved His own who were in the world, He now showed them the full extent of His love. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under His power, that He had come from God, and He was returning to God. So He got up from the meal, took off His outer clothing, put a towel around his waist, and after that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't realize what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," Peter replied, "you'll never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." Well, Jesus said this, Simon Peter replied, "Well then, Lord, not just my hands and my feet, but my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you. For you see, he knew who was going to betray him, and that is why he said, 'Not every one of you is clean.' Well, when he had finished washing their feet, he put his clothes on, and he returned to his place, and he said, 'Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So now that I, your teacher and Lord, have washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. I've set you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is the messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." So if we start with the very last verse, you remember earlier in our series we said the measurement of leadership is movement. Jesus closes this expression of leadership and says, now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them, if you move on them. Now, when you look at this example of leadership, what are some things that you notice? What are some things that stood out to you? When I look at it, I think, well, wow. One of the things that stands out to me is Judas is there. So when Jesus washes their feet, he washed Judas's feet. I wonder what that felt like to Judas. I wonder what it felt like to Jesus. We know what Peter said. Peter was like, "No, you can't do this." And have you thought about why Peter said that? Well, I've thought about it. Well, first of all, this was a very common act of service. Normally, when someone hosted a meal like this, there would have been a servant nearby that would have washed everybody's feet. This was the job of a servant. But for some reason, none of the disciples thought of themselves as servants that night. It was Jesus who had to model it for them. I also wonder if years later, when the disciples reflected back on that evening and they remembered, wow, he even washed Judas's feet. What an example of leadership. Now notice also that Jesus says, because I'm your teacher and your Lord, I've set you an example. Now I want you to think with me about something. What would have happened if Jesus might have said, now if I, the Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should want to wash my feet? Well, of course everybody would have said, me first, me first, me first. Because see, Jesus is important. Jesus would be looked at as, oh my goodness, yes, we want to wash his feet. See, think about this. If there was a famous entertainer that you really, really like, or a famous athlete that you really, really like, and you found out they were coming to your town, and through some kind of a contest or something, they chose you to spend the day with them. They wanted you to show them around town. So you meet them and you dress in the way that you hope will be, thoughtful and pleasing and acceptable. You're trying to take secret selfies all day and tweet them out to your friends or post them and like, look who I'm with, Well, see, Jesus understood that if he said to them, you ought to want to wash my feet, then they would have all had the wrong motivation. The motivation would have been to wash someone's feet that you think is important. But when Jesus said, no, my example here is that you would wash one another's feet, that means that I am now leading I am serving, but I'm serving people that maybe I didn't understand their value. I didn't think of them as being that valuable. So if you think about the entertainer or the athlete who wants to come to your town, wants to spend the day with you, and how you would feel about that perhaps, what about having to spend the day with someone at school or in your family or at church who you don't think is that important? Someone that you wouldn't necessarily take a selfie with and post it. In fact, it might be someone that you might not tell any of your friends. You see, this is where Jesus is exposing our motivation. For Jesus, motivation does not begin with the reward. For Jesus, motivation begins with your identity. Who are you? You see, Jesus showed that we lead by example, that we are servant leaders, that we are relational leaders, and we intentionally lead in uncomfortable situations. Now, I'm going to repeat those. Jesus teaches through the foot washing example that we lead by example, that we are servant leaders, that we are relational leaders, and we intentionally lead in uncomfortable circumstances. So Jesus understands that could be difficult to stay motivated if all you're looking for is the reward. What is the reward of washing Judas's feet? Well, there is a reward, but we need to mine for it. We need to explore for it. So let's look at this. When you think about people who serve, several missionary families that I've talked to said they end up with two kinds of mission groups, like if churches come and do a mission in their area. One of them they call a parachute group. These are a mission team that kind of parachutes in, they come in, and the team basically has an agenda. They know what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, and the mission team spends most of its time doing what they want to do, not necessarily what the missionaries need, taking pictures so they can send the pictures home. And he said it's kind of a quasi-vacation. He said, actually, those kinds of teams wear missionaries out. They can even do more harm than good for the missionary. He said, but then there's other kinds of teams. These are the teams that in advance get a hold of us, work with us, find out what we need done, find out the projects that will benefit the mission. And oftentimes these projects, they're a lot of work. And there's not a lot of, external attention. There's a lot of, hard work and sweat. And sometimes you're too tired at the end of the day to take a picture or to take a selfie. Not that you might not do that, but it is tiring work. And everything is done to benefit the mission and benefit the people. And he said, those are the mission teams that we look for. Those are the people we can't wait to show up. Because even though it's work, we feel like they're not here for themselves, but they're here for the mission. So how do we get motivated this way? Jesus says that leadership motivation is not based in instant gratification. Leadership can be gratifying, but it's not based in instant gratification. So how do we grow in this motivation? Well, let's think about this for a few moments. Growing in this motivation requires maturity. So I want to walk you through 4 steps of motivational growth. The first is sometimes we do things out of duty. We think to ourselves, this is what a good person would do in this situation. It is my duty. Now, I'm not suggesting that's bad motivation, not at all. Sometimes duty is what gets you through. But when you're doing something because of duty, you only want to do it as long as you have to. So there's a second kind of motivation, and that is need. That you see the needs of others and you want to help them. But once again, once that need is passed, then the opportunity to serve is passed. There's a third kind of motivation, and that is it feels good. Now, this is the truth. Serving others does feel good a lot of the time. It is satisfying a lot of the time, and especially if you do it with a team of people, it can be very enjoyable to serve together. So, duty, need, it feels good. Let's look at the fourth one. Sometimes it feels good to use your talents. You have talents, you have gifts, you have experience, and it kind of feels good to be able to solve someone's problem. It kind of feels good to know how to dig that ditch, build that wall, build that house, whatever the project is, collect those coats, whatever it is, it kind of feels good to use your organizational skills, your people skills, or whatever. But in all four of these scenarios, duty, need, it feels good, and using your talents, in each one, it's short term. As soon as it's over, your service is over. So what Jesus says is, let's look at it a different way. Instead of thinking of your leadership as being a service you do, think of it as an identity you become. You see, in this text, in John 13, just like the very first text we read at the beginning of this series, in Luke chapter 6 and verse 40, Jesus identifies us as servants. We're not just servers, people who occasionally serve. We are servants. That becomes our identity. So now our motivation isn't just doing something that feels good, fulfilling a duty, fulfilling a need, and using our talents. Now our service flows out of who we are. So what is happening is God is using circumstances like the foot washing to actually develop us to become more like Christ. We're becoming that Christ-centered, connected, community-impacting leader. See, every time that we serve in order to become more like Christ, it doesn't matter whether the service situation is really fun or difficult, whether it goes the way we want or it doesn't go the way we want. We can still grow from that experience, so we're benefited no matter how it goes. The ultimate motivation is that I can grow in my leadership no matter what the experience. Now, I want to describe this as we close this session like a crucible. A crucible is like a bowl in which it's heated up and all of the elements that are put into the crucible are melted down so they can be reformed. So, crucibles of service, crucibles of leadership, sometimes put us in difficult, heated situations, challenging situations. But while we stay in that situation and remain faithful, then we are formed to be more like Christ. We become better leaders. So, when I wash the feet of a person who turns out to be a Judas, my own moral authority can be developed. My moral character is developed. My trajectory of trustworthiness is developed. When I'm in a serving or a leadership situation where someone disagrees with me, criticizes me, puts me down, and I use my communication skills of patience, humility, and empathy, my moral character grows. My ability to lead grows. My trajectory of trustworthiness grows. When I'm in a situation where my team is afraid and they feel like they're going to fail, but I inspire them to know that there's more to them, I'm the one that's absorbing the anxiety of the situation because I'm the leader, or you're the leader. But our leadership is growing. So even if it's tough, even if there's some blood, sweat, and tears in all of it, even if there's some frustration and yes, a few failures along the way, your leadership still grows. And I got to tell you something. No great leader has an undefeated season. Just like no NBA team is going to have an undefeated season, no baseball team is going to have an undefeated season, we're not going to have undefeated seasons in our leadership. We're going to have small mistakes and big mistakes, small failures and large failures, just like we're going to have small victories and large victories. So what I'm encouraging you to say is, okay, so duty is one form of motivation. Okay. Seeing people's needs and wanting to meet them is one form of motivation. Okay. Because it feels good is a form of motivation, and because I can use my talents as a motivation, but all of those are temporal. All of them are short term. The ultimate motivation comes from my identity as a servant of God. And so every time I'm leading, I'm becoming more like Him. Every time I'm serving like Jesus, when He washes people's feet, I'm becoming more like Him. In all of these circumstances, Jesus is saying to us, you do realize that you'll be blessed if you do them. So in your leadership development, you're going to have times when you're going to be fearful. You're going to think you want to do something and think, yeah, but people will make fun of me if I fail. I don't know if it'll work. And you're missing out on the blessing. Leaders risk. Leaders step in. Leaders are willing to step forward. And so as you do that, there's things that will go right and there's things that won't. But it's up to you to be that leader that doesn't give in to false finish lines. You don't quit before you're finished. You stay with it all the way through. And when you do, not only do you make a difference, but your leadership is developed. Remember, if you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.